My entire life has always been shambolic, with fate not being the kindest whenever it smiled upon me. It reaches for the depths of my happiness, however little I may own for a moment, and just rips it out without a care. That's how I have always felt in this old creaky house left behind by my old man, without any treasures to be found or letters to be burned, just a hideous silver crucifix necklace he gave me as a gift on my 10th birthday, the same day he died. "This will always protect you, child. Hold it close to your heart," was the promise he made when he gave me the crucifix. But I guess it was all just talk. The crucifix didn't protect anything at all. I lost everything. Whenever I stepped outside, I could tell the minds of the faces staring at me, the hands pulling away their kids. I could tell no one thought any good of me, but how could I blame them? I'm not without blame myself. Causing the death of one's parents isn't something anyone would welcome with open arms, so in their defense, they were justified in their own rights. Every morning, I would wander off into the streets, into the woods, and towards the train tracks, hoping that my misery may finally come to an end. But no, this is the very moment fate always frowns upon me, as if saying, "Why wish to die?" My replies were always the same, a hysterical scream that would always send the crows, which always lurked in the woods, into the sky. Oh, what a moment it always was. But I could care less for a power said to be in control of everything that happens in the lives of insignificant beings like humans, things that cannot be stopped or changed. No matter how dark or gloomy my life may seem to be, I still find a way to be happy, however short it may last. I've always loved music and have been very much interested in pieces marked as legendary projects. So it was common for me to always break my pockets for a vinyl that catches my interest whenever I was doing my job as a salesboy in an old record store, which sits not so far from the school in our little town, Oak Hills. This is the same school I was going to skip some periods at today, to try my luck on the train tracks once again. I lay there, watching the crows hover in the sky, waiting to take a piece of me with them when the next train runs over my body. Whether the crows would fly towards heaven or hell always seemed to bother me though, because let's not lie, who wouldn't want to see heaven? A holy place, with a host of angels singing hallelujah to the Most High, but I was nothing close to holy. I waited and waited and waited a little longer until I burst out into a hysterical scream, which overshadowed the rhythmic clacking sound coming from the distance. Fate wins again. I picked up my bag and started moving back in the direction from which I came. The streets were really busy now, with tourists who usually came into our little town to catch a glimpse of something rare and symbolic. Our greatest treasure, some would say. Kenny Jones's last and most successful record ever, Pride. Despite being a hit record in the 1870s, no one has ever come across this vinyl record in old collection stores or in the possession of their family members. According to stories told by some old folks, Kenny Jones made a deal with the devil and sold his soul for fame at the Redwood and Cedar Street crossroads, and the Pride record was a product of that deal. People who had the record complained of strange phenomena occurring whenever they played it, so further sale of the record was banned in the country. Everyone who had the vinyl in their possession broke and burned it, all except the last piece, which was found in our town, Kenny Jones' hometown. The record store owner had found it in a family home, which belonged to his grandfather, here in our town, and decided to make the most out of such a rare piece. Of course, not everyone agreed for it to be kept, but these numbers were insignificant compared to the revenue that this vinyl generated in tourism for Oak Hills, so people paid no heed to them. One of the people in disagreement was Father Augustine, a priest who came into our town about 3 years ago when my parents died in an alleyway. He arrived as a replacement for the former priest in our town's local church, Father Silas, who was said to be away on missionary work in Asia. He always preached about his disagreements in church and even had members protest in front of the store with placards and signs saying, "Destroy all evil." But this soon died down over the years as the members began to lose interest in the cause. However, this didn't waver his determination to see the vinyl destroyed. I made my way into the school and waited outside the classroom for the period to be over. which happened soon. The remainder of the school period was for extracurricular activities, so I went to the music room where the choir would be practicing for the upcoming school festival. It had been my dream to be a part of the school choir for the longest time, but I wasn't allowed to join. No matter how hard I tried, the choir master always declined. So I always sat in one of the empty seats in the audience area and watched them practice. To be honest, it always rubbed me some type of way whenever I watched them perform, me not being there, but that was soon going to change. Some of my classmates in the choir, Patrick, Fabian, Charlie, and Vicky, promised me a seat in the choir if I was able to do something first, steal the Pride vinyl from the record store. Such a sweet and tempting offer didn't take much time for me to think over. In fact, it was an immediate answer. But looking over it now, it really seems like a crazy and dangerous thing to do. First of all, I'm only able to attend this school through a scholarship given by the mayor of the town, and doing anything to tamper with that meant the end of the road for me. All these were pretty clear as day in my memory, but my weakness, my longing for that little happiness, got the better of me, so I just had to do it. Practice took about 2 hours, and when they were done, we walked to the yard behind the school where we discussed the entire plan. Charlie handed me the keys, and Patrick laid out the mission. The rush of adrenaline was pretty high within us. Trying to do something as crazy as stealing something so important brought about such a feeling. We were to meet in front of the school by 10 p.m. and proceed to the store, where I would get into the store and steal the record. I really didn't care why they needed to steal the record, so there was no need to bring up unnecessary questions. Vicky was the one who brought the offer to me on a certain day at their rehearsal. She knew I worked at the record store, and I could be a big advantage in making it a success, so that was that. After school ended, I skipped work at the record store for the day and headed home to get myself ready for what we were doing that night. Thoughts rushed through my head like a train as I calculated all the possible outcomes. When night fell, we met up a little after 10 p.m. and then headed towards the record store. It was raining, and the roads were slippery wet, making us move carefully towards the back door. I could feel a bit of a burning sensation in my stomach. It almost felt like I could throw up at any time, but I didn't. This was really happening. Charlie and Fabian stayed outside the store, keeping watch while the rest of us went in after I opened the door. I made my way towards the shelf on which the record hung, with Patrick following closely behind me. Vicky stayed behind, looking through some of the other records on the shelf. They seemed to have caught her attention, but this was met with an angry reaction from Patrick. "Don't be dumb. Put that down and focus on why we came here." Vicky took no offense and put the record down, but for some strange reason, I felt offended on her behalf. Maybe it was because I liked the fact that she got hooked looking at the record, or that I was just nervous and needed to cool off, but whatever it was, it really led to something otherworldly. "Do not speak to her like that." My voice commanded an authority I never thought myself having, and it felt really good. But a challenge like that obviously came with a retaliation, with Patrick feeling some type of way being confronted by someone like me. We bickered and threw insults, damaging words that only seemed to infuriate us. Fabian and Charlie, hearing the noise from outside, had to come in to put an end to our scuffle. Charlie took the key from me, opened the shelf, and took out the record himself. "It's time to leave. Stop wasting time here with foolish insults and let's go." Fabian, who was already ahead, called for us to follow, which we did. However, we were brought to a halt when a strange sound began to fill the air. I could feel my throat begin to burn, and my ears hurting so much from this sound that I felt I could go deaf. This was when I looked up and saw Charlie next to an old phonograph, which always sat on one of the shelves in the room, playing the vinyl record. I tried calling out to him, to tell him to take out the record, but I couldn't get any words out. And this was when I saw it. Like a portal leading to the abyss, the ground below opened, and I could see a large door opening slowly, revealing what seemed like a lake of molten magma floating around. I could hear voices screaming as they writhed and cried in agony, and my throat burned even more. Was this hell? I asked myself, fully aware of the answer. Realizing what was going on, fear struck me, and I couldn't breathe. The legend and myth surrounding Kenny Jones' record were true. We were witnessing it unlike we'd ever been told. The others had passed out around me, and Charlie was still standing and staring into the record, which continued playing this ominous sound that caused havoc all over the store. Records were flying out of their shelves, the lights flickered, the screams from the depths became louder, and I could barely keep myself standing. All through the ordeal, one thing stayed on my mind. I wasn't dying here. It felt funny seeing that I always did try to kill myself on the train tracks, but from a different perspective of things, a part of me really did want to live. A part of me wanted to survive to see tomorrow and the day after that. That's the realization I came to as my eyes slowly closed as I gasped for air on the floor, with my ears writhing in pain as they bled. If the crows were to come now, hell didn't seem far away anymore. Mustering my energy, the last of it, I struggled to get myself off the floor and slowly crept onto the table, towards the phonograph still playing the record. The closer I got, the more intense the sound became, as if trying to keep me away. The forces were against me. I could feel it in my bones, but I was never one to back down. I crept further, stretching my thin hand to reach the needle, and finally got it off. The music stopped now, and the ominous sounds drowned away. In a dramatic turn, my hand fell against the vinyl on the groove, which was still spinning, and this was when it happened. Everything came to me in a flash as I screamed out loud. A series of events in the life of Kenny Jones was revealed to me. Him getting mocked on the streets when he performed, the moments he sat alone in the dark crying and cursing God, and then a great flame erupted, revealing a humongous gate that stretched into the blood-red sky, adorned with blasphemous words and images twisting and turning as if it were alive. Standing at its entrance was a woman with skin as smooth as silk and lips as red as rubies. Beside her was a hellhound, with terror in his eyes enough to make the bravest of hearts cower in fear. Behind her was a lake burning with fire, with silhouette figures screaming and gnashing their teeth in pain and anguish. These were the gates of hell. The woman stretched her hands from the gates, holding something wrapped in darkness, and handed it over to Kenny Jones, who knelt in front of the gates. He held up collected dust in his left palm and an apple in his right. The woman took these items from him, and he received the object from her. When he unwrapped it from the darkness, it was the Pride vinyl. Instantly, as I laid eyes on it, Kenny Jones looked at me with his eyes glowing white, the woman standing at the gate with her eyes glowing yellow, and the hellhound with his glowing in red. They screamed as they flew towards me, and as they drew closer, I finally woke up, breathing heavily, drenched in sweat and water, clenching the crucifix on my neck. Yes, I did wear the crucifix for the first time today. What the hell was that? Am I finally back to the land of the living? I could see Charlie, Vicky, Fabian, and Patrick also, all awake and drenched in water just like I was. They all looked really weak and could barely keep their eyes open as they lay on a sofa. But I too wasn't exempted from this, as my body felt so weak and my ears rang like a bell that I could barely hear anyone speak. In front of me were Father Augustine and Mr. Vincent, the store owner, who were discussing something inaudible. I really did it this time. We've been caught. It's all over for me. Mr. Vincent came up to me and held my face, checking my eyes and feeling my pulse. Dear Lord, I almost didn't know if you would make it back, lad. I saw the store from my house, and I got into this really cold rain to check what had happened, only to find you squirts doing something you weren't supposed to. Something I have warned you about severally, not to mess with. What am I to do with you all? I could only hear him faintly, but I didn't need my ears to tell that he was really pissed, and I too was ready for anything he would throw at me. Juvenile prison couldn't be all that bad considering how old we were. But he didn't punish us, nor did he report the incident, all because of Father Augustine's pleas on our behalf, he said. Instead, he called for an ambulance to take us to the hospital. These two men, who never seemed to agree with each other, were now talking by the window. I could see Mr. Vincent handing something over to Father Augustine. I looked closer and realized it was Kenny Jones's vinyl. Then it all came back to me, what I witnessed after passing out on the table. I needed to tell them now that they were here. I tried, but I was too weak to even talk. It was terrible, and the images lingered in my mind, but there was no way to express it. The ambulance came, and we were taken to the hospital where I was injected with something in the ER, which made me fall fast asleep. In a dream, I was walking in the woods and emerged at the train tracks to which I was tied. From a distance, I could hear the train coming, just like I always did, but I was fastened to the tracks this time around, so I couldn't just up and leave. I tried wriggling myself, but that proved abortive. I was still stuck until headlights got closer and closer, and then I opened my eyes to a bright fluorescent bulb above me. I turned and looked around. The ECG machine beeped loudly like an alarm, reminding me of where I was. The drops of liquid from the IV drip complemented the beep in a melodic manner that I could almost sing along to. Music. That was what got me here in the first place. How were the others doing? Were they in the same room as me? I couldn't tell from my bed, with the curtains blocking my view from both sides. I tried getting up, feeling a little dizzy from the lights above me, when I saw something strange on the back of my hand, a tattoo of a black letter X. I observed it closely and tried cleaning it off with my hospital gown, but it wasn't coming off. As I did this, a strange whistling sound echoed from the distance. I ignored it at first. The events around me were getting a bit too weird to not pay attention to, but it continued, and before I knew it, I had removed the IV and ECG electrodes from my body and followed the sound out of the room, tracing it through the stairs until I came up to a door. I opened it and walked into the dimly lit room. The whistling was strong in here, so I slowly moved towards it, navigating through the room filled with broken and dusty machines. I finally came up to an old rusty file cabinet standing amongst some IV poles in the dark, and I could hear it clearly now. Holding my breath, not knowing what to expect, I slowly opened the first drawer, which was the origin of the whistle, and I saw within it Kenny Jones's Pride vinyl. In a frantic manner, I jolted backwards, tripping over some boxes on the floor. The room began to shake violently, and the cabinets, the IV poles, and other items in the room started falling to the ground, one of which landed on me as I stayed on the floor, trying to get a clue of what was going on. The eeriness of it all sent shivers down my spine, making me hesitant to even glance upwards. I have been trapped by fate.